Hi, everyone. We're here to talk about web3 infrastructure. Chose a topic about decentralization versus distribution. I'm from Anchor, head of infrastructure.
Hey guys, I'm Luis. I'm the co-founder of Gelato Network.
Hello everyone. This is Asif from Polygon. I take care of the DeFi stuff at Polygon. Really excited to be here today.
Yeah, so obviously for Anchor, we do a lot of work to distribute our network. There's a lot of discussion about what does decentralization mean in infrastructure. Obviously, to a certain extent, we are centralized as an RPC provider. We have a website, we use Cloudflare, and so on. But we do work very hard to distribute our nodes around the world. So we're in 37 metro areas, 37 different data centers, including third-party providers as well. We are always striving to understand what we can do more to be more decentralized, be more distributed. And so I'm interested to hear what other people's ideas are about their efforts to, or how important decentralization is to your protocols, to your blockchains, what efforts you're doing to do that, and so on.
Yeah. At Gelato, we're also in the business of building the decentralized backbone, backend for Web3 applications, whether they be on Polygon, BNB chain, all of these places. And we're also in an eternal struggle to try to decentralize as much as possible, but also being mindful and sort of realistic about the fact that there's a bunch of very good technology out there that doesn't necessarily lend itself to decentralization, like HTTP servers or whatever, but they still have their place in this world, right? Like a website, nothing wrong about that. Not everything has to be decentralized. Although, of course, I think one of the points that I see today still sort of lacking is like IPFS and so on is really cool, but it's not really that production ready, I would say. It's just, people have problems with pinning services and so on all the time. But yeah, so what we're sort of focusing on is having this decentralized backend component. So we're working together with Anchor, with RPC providers. We're working together with networks like Polygon to basically provide a decentralized backend for decentralized applications, because developers always think, okay, the smart contract is my backend. You can like write a bit of Solidity and then just put a front end, a dApp on top of it, and it works. But in reality, smart contracts by themselves are not powerful enough to really, support a lot of like high usage applications. There are some differences maybe, but like Uniswap is a very powerful application, but that's about it. Everything else really needs a very strong backend components for things like automation, data oracles, transaction relaying at scale, all of these things, account abstraction. And what we're basically trying is to give developers these technologies, like these server technologies, but in a decentralized way, and give them access to this decentralized network of data and transaction execution with as little centralization as possible. And for example, what we can do there is you can use smart contracts to regulate data and validate data on chain. And if that is not possible, then you can still validate the data in a network of nodes off-chain. They have to come to consensus on it. Yeah, but that's basically what we're working on. And one of the things that are also still centralized in Gelato, centralized but distributed, is, for example, the API gateway for our Relay API, right? Like, there's no really good way, I think, to decentralize an endpoint like that. I mean, I'm sure you are researching decentralized RPCs, which is super interesting, but we haven't really seen them yet. Yeah, we also sort of have the same question because, yeah, giving developers a P2P client simply is not as developer-friendly as giving them an HTTP API. That's basically it. And yeah, so, that's where the centralized choke points still are, but maybe they will remain. Maybe, yeah, would be interesting to hear your points on that.
So I think the way we think about decentralization and services is that you can probably verticalize it across. So on the one end of the spectrum, you've got things like the base layer, that is Polygon, blockchain, beta, ZK, EVM, which will come live on 27th. or our current POS network. And then on top of that, there are a lot of infra layers, be it oracles, be it RPC providers, and be it user-facing applications, be it dApps, or even like these front-end applications you have right now, like things like Zapper, Debank. So I think as you move down the spectrum, UX matters a lot. So maybe things like Debank or Zapper, they can be very well centralized because they are catering to the end user. So I think their UX matters a lot. Maybe than how their backend is decentralized or distributed, because you need like fast access to data there. But I think on the other side of the spectrum, if you talk about Polygon, the base layer, you've got a decentralized set of validators where you cannot afford level of centralization because economic incentives are involved there. And if people will have incentives to be a bad actor, they will. That's what we have seen in last 2 years, last 1 year especially. So yeah, I think it's more about this spectrum and figuring out where you can sort of tolerate some centralization and where you just cannot. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think that finding that balance between decentralization, centralization, speed, accuracy, all of these different trade-offs that you have to make when you're designing these services are critical. I don't think there's particularly a right answer about this in some of these cases. You can play it off. I mean, I had a lot of conversations yesterday with people who were saying, look, at the end of the day, how many people really care about decentralization on RPC, right? They just want a fast service, a fast, accurate service. They want one place to go to, and they want to be able to get their data. They want to send their transactions. At the same time, we're not sitting down and saying, that's the end of the story. We've done a good enough job. We work very hard to try and get third-party providers in. There are some privacy concerns for us because we're very, at Anchor, we're very focused on, and we've just rewritten our privacy policy to make it really clear. We don't mine your data. We don't front-run you. We don't link your address with your IP address and all of this kind of stuff. Once we start bringing in third-party providers for our RPCs, we run into this issue that we don't control that anymore. So there are some trade-offs that we have to make there and some understandings about these things.
Yeah, I think maybe the sort of conceptual mistake that a lot of web3 crypto ideologists make, you know, I also started out being like everything has to be decentralized and so on, and that's true. I think over the long term, as much should be decentralized as possible, but it shouldn't stop you from shipping something quickly. Most important thing is that we get more users in at a quick rate, and you can't, you know, ask users to use a website that is down all the time or slow or something, right? They will not come to Web3 if that's the case. So I think there's totally fine to make some shortcuts as long as you're not, you know, violating the core tenets of crypto, which is, you know, don't custody the user assets, don't have one guy or one company be able to rug everybody and so on. So as long as this is still true, which you can regulate in most of the cases via smart contract, you know, if your front end is still centralized, if your API is still centralized or something, that's fine. You're a business. You have every incentive for it to be available at all times to users. But then again, right, we want to be an open global economy, and there are a bunch of people, I don't know, maybe in Iran or so, that are good guys and girls, and they want to build a reliable application, and they don't want to be OFAC censored or something, right? So it is important, I think, in the long run, but you shouldn't try to shoehorn decentralization into something that isn't ready yet. So I think we should all on our roadmaps have decentralization plans for everything. We should invest in decentralization where it's not here yet, but we should still ship with whatever works today and then progress there with time.
Yep. For sure, totally agreed. I think what matters here, I think totally agreed that early on, maybe you can tolerate some trade-offs because you want to offer services to people, you want more people to come in, you want more users. And maybe in short term, if that happens, maybe at the expense of decentralization, I think that's a valid take. But I think you need to have a very, very clear roadmap as to how you're going to go about things in future. So let's say if you think about Polygon, when we started our network, the POS chain, which has its own set of validators, so it does not borrow exactly from Ethereum layer 1 security. But I think back then we had a very clear path that we want to ship a product upfront. We want to get users in, we want to offer dApps. But at the same time, we invested a lot on the ZK capabilities, and that is why we're going to now ship the ZK EVM mainnet beta on 27th. And it's been a lot of hard work behind the scenes, and it's been a lot to sticking to this idea that we want secure, decentralized infra for the developers. I think even if you talk about ZK EVM, right now, there would be a centralized sequencer because we just released mainnet, but I think there's a very, very clear path as to how we want to then decentralize the sequencer as well. So there's something called proof of efficiency, which will use Matic token and which will then enable independent, permissionless sequencer runners to come into the network to participate, to become sequencer validators in a way you can say. Sure, I think for sure you can tolerate like centralization in some manner for some short amount of time, but you need to have a very, very clear path as to how things will look in future. Yep.
Yeah. No, I think that's a big challenge for ZK. I mean, essentially, I actually started in the crypto space back in 2018 with Horizon, which is a clone of Zcash. And yeah, that was more decentralized, but not on the validator side. This was all GPUs and so on like that. But as I've worked with Anchor, it's definitely about that. It's a challenge that all of the sequencing, it's all off-chain. It's all happening somewhere else on somebody else's computer. So to an extent, the privacy is compromised, potentially compromised. And so definitely decentralizing that is a very important feature, I think, for moving forward with that stuff. Yeah.
And I think the panel title talked about distribution versus decentralization, so maybe a word on that. So I think distribution is really a question of modern software deployment architecture. And really, you want at a certain scale, if you have a ton of usage, decent loads, you want your system to be distributed because only then can you ensure high availability across the globe, uptime, all these things. And yeah, so that's, I think, really important. And many companies, Web2 companies, they're all distributed server companies. And in some manner, they're also, I think, decentralized sort of internally. They use decentralized architecture, sometimes P2P. I'm sure Amazon, AWS uses P2P and so on, right? So you can actually, if you zoom in, you can be a centralized company and still leverage distributed and decentralized technologies to great effect. But in Web3, the decentralization question, so distribution is not a question, like it's do it or die pretty much at some scale. In Web3, decentralization means not just one company having the power, right? Not one company can go out of business. Not one company can shut down your application or servers. It's really about that. And there, I think we can, all get inspired by the Ethereum protocol, by the Bitcoin protocol. And at the end of the day, what we're trying to build here is not like companies that control a network, like fake networks, right? But what we actually want to build is self-sufficient digital economies that are decentralized. So we have these amazing digital assets that are digitally transferable and everything. So now what we need to do is we need to match, for example, in Gelato, the demand from application developers for server power with the server power distributors and so on. And all of this should be matched in a self-sufficient on-chain protocol where the exchange of payment and so on is all encoded, so that eventually as Gelato we can also step away, we can go out of business or whatever it is, or turn crazy, and that network will still be self-sufficient, it will still have an economy that supports a certain amount of node operators, so that any one of these can go out of business and you as an application developer can still sleep well at night knowing that your app will be served. Yeah, so I think that's like the big difference here as compared to decentralization in Web2, where it's really, yes, it's decentralized technology, but one company makes the decisions. Here it's about, there's a protocol that regulates this marketplace, and it's always there. You can join it permissionlessly, you can exit it, and it still works. The economics are right. So yeah.
One company or one country, I think, is also the other question. Certainly for Anchor, as I said, we have 7, 8 different providers. We don't use cloud at all in our RPC business. We only use bare metal. We are distributed in that sense. We have lots of data centers all over the place. One of the reasons, obviously, to move away from using AWS as we had done previously was about price, but the other one was about the ability to not be censored in that way. So if AWS gets the mandate, or they're being told no more crypto, what happens then, right? So I don't know if that's a feasible situation, a real situation that will ever happen, but who knows? I mean, regulations have been coming down on various crypto companies, and anything could change from day to day. I mean, we're still a US company. We still have to abide by US law, but at least from the infrastructure perspective, we are distributed. Yeah.
I think now we have been speaking a lot about the infra side of things, which, and specifically like RPC and blockchain layer, but I think would love to talk more on the Oracle side as well, because if you talk about DeFi, be it lending markets, perp markets, Oracles are a big critical piece of the whole DeFi stack, and I think the last 1 year saw a lot of perp volume happening on chain. So be it GMX, which has done like almost 100 bill. Gains has done like 25 bill on Polygon. Sin Futures has done like almost 20 bill on Polygon. But if you think about Oracles and their centralization, in a way, if you talk about order flow auctions, the whole story that started around 1993, wherein these brokerage firms started selling order flow to these market makers. I think if you think about Oracles, in a way, Oracles are the way to realize order flow auctions, and in a way, a sort of an MEV can happen on an Oracle layer. So let's say you have an Oracle provider, there's some bunch of data providers, and they also happen to be market makers who are, let's say, trading on CEXs. Now, if they are providing prices to the Oracle network, in a way, they control the price that is existing on chain, and in a way, they can then front run the perpetual transactions that are happening on chain on Oracle level. So I think Chainlink's been doing really well, but there are some trade-offs there as well, because on some of these price feeds, the heartbeat or the deviation may be too conservative. So for some of them, it may be like 0.5% heartbeat, 0.5% deviation, something like that. And some of these newer Oracles take data directly from these providers who may be market makers. So I think like as a whole DeFi community builders, we've got to think about Oracle decentralization and this whole Oracle extractable value in a way, because I think this will be like a key thing, because now perps have significant volume on chain, which I think was not happening like 2 years ago or even 1 year ago. Yep. So would love to know your thoughts on the Oracle side of things as well.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think one of the unfortunate situations that DeFi finds itself in, that is always a bit hushed over, like it's not really addressed that much. It's becoming more now is this, vast monopoly that Chainlink has. I think they got there deservedly, right? They have amazing technology. They pushed really hard for this, but they bear some resemblance to a sort of 90s Microsoft, super aggressive sort of monopoly company. And I think that's very bad for DeFi, right? Like, because at the moment, if you look under, what DeFi is, under the rug, no pun intended, then you will see that a lot of it is really just all reliant on Chainlink. And I think we need to see a lot more innovation there, a lot more competition. And hopefully some new Oracle designs that are also much faster, that's needed for a lot of applications. I talked to the guys from Redstone recently. It's, I think, a new project. There are some cool designs, like Oracle-less design is also an idea, right? Like lending markets built on Uniswap v3, like TimeSwap. But they usually, I think, have some restriction in the sense that they have to be sort of fixed time, and that doesn't really translate well into our world. But these also exist, so Oracle-less solutions are amazing. I mean, Uniswap, for example, okay, they have their own TWAP oracles, but that's a very cool on-chain thing that you know is really decentralized. But yeah, totally agree. I think we need to see a lot more innovation there on this front, and not just from one company. And we will see that in the coming years. And DeFi will be better afterwards.
Okay, so I think we're heading up to our last 4 minutes. Do you guys want to talk about any future plans for any of your products that you're working on towards decentralization, distribution, etc., anything like that?
Yeah, so at Gelato we right now have 3 services in our network that we offer. One of them is Automate. That's the original one that we sort of invented. We were like the first smart contract automation protocol. And there it's already pretty decentralized because it relies on-chain logic. So as an application, you have full control over the data flow in your application on-chain. And actually, as of recently, we finally removed a centralized technology, RabbitMQ, and swapped it for libp2p, a decentralized technology. And we're able to onboard the first node operators to our network. So it wasn't just us running the Gelato nodes anymore. It has been now, staking facilities, for example, and we're talking to many others. So at the moment, Gelato node operators are in a private beta. If you are a node operator, please contact us. And our long-term vision there is to, by 2024, 2025, be a completely open permissionless market so that anyone can spin up a node similar to what you can do in Ethereum. Just have to stake some gel and off you go. And for relaying, it's similar. It's also using the same network. So as we add more node operators, it will become more decentralized. But there you always have decentralized choke points, like an HTTP gateway, like as you know from the RPC business. And last year, end of last year, we shipped our web3 functions, and that's our own sort of first foray into, I guess, what you could call oracles, where we're now allowing off-chain data, APIs, and so on to also be used again, adding node operators, adding staking. It's coming, and just working at it, being patient, but never losing sight of the target.
Yeah, for sure. I think for us, like the biggest focus area right now is definitely our ZK EVM network, which will be coming live on 27th. All transactions, everything, and just making sure that this networks run smoothly is the best execution layer for DeFi, NFTs, gaming. Yep.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to think about potentially reducing the need for some of these decentralization efforts by protecting the transactions as they go through and things like this, so that it's not the potential for censorship and tracking and so on like that is less. Certainly within Anchor, we're working. We did actually at one point release a third-party node providing service. We were working on this hard as a project. It got sidelines, but we are starting that back up again, and that's certainly one of the focuses for us, is to get third parties, individuals. We will focus initially on a vetted group of professional people or professional companies that are doing RPC and do that. And also we're working on version 3 of our network, which is fundamentally, without releasing any more details, much more decentralized than the current system that we have with Cloudflare and so on like that. Cool. Well, I think we're at time. Thanks, everybody, and have a good time.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.